Jasmine Crockett insults Kash Patel, go back to India, but his response shocks all of America. It was a typical night at CNN's debate studio, but tonight felt different. Under the harsh lights, the stage was set for what would become one of the most shocking confrontations in 2025's political arena. Kash Patel, the 45-year-old former FBI director nominee and veteran of Trump's administration, adjusted his tie with calm precision, the kind that comes with decades of serving in the intelligence community. His eyes were sharp and alert, but it was his demeanor, his quiet confidence, that made him a formidable figure. Across from him sat Jasmine Crockett, the 36-year-old fiery Democratic Congresswoman known for her sharp wit, bold opinions, and unapologetic stance on social justice. She leaned forward in her chair, ready for battle. Wearing a navy blazer that contrasted with her sharp words, she looked every bit the fierce advocate for progressive change. This wasn't just a policy debate, it was a showdown. The two had been chosen to debate the future of America's national security and immigration policies. Both were seen as rising stars in their respective parties, with Crockett, a Texas congresswoman known for her work on criminal justice reform, and Patel's reputation as a Trump loyalist who had worked tirelessly on national security. But when the debate began, it quickly became clear that this wouldn't just be about policy. Mr. Patel Crockett began, her voice dripping with that trademark edge. Maybe it's time you stop pretending to understand what American values mean. You're more comfortable cozying up to the rich and powerful. Maybe it's time you go back to India where you truly belong. The words hit the air like a bomb. The studio audience gasped. Anderson Cooper blinked in disbelief. Social media would later call it one of the most racist comments ever uttered live on TV by a major political figure. But Kash Patel's response was something no one expected. What he said next didn't just end Jasmine Crockett's moment, it exposed a truth about America that would leave the nation stunned. Miss Crockett, I suggest you choose your words very carefully. Patel began, his tone calm but intense. His voice had a sharpness to it, like a man who knew he was about to drop a truth bomb. America's ideals were built by immigrants. My family came here in the 1970s with nothing but a dream to contribute and work hard. He paused for effect. But let's talk about who really belongs here. My family worked their asses off for what we've got. I didn't have to learn to love this country from a book. I was taught to live it every single day. The crowd murmured, the tension rising. Patel wasn't just taking the high road, he was dismantling Crockett's entire argument piece by piece. And he wasn't done. Jasmine Crockett, visibly rattled, shot back, "Oh, please. I don't have to prove my love for this country to anyone. Unlike some people, I've always had the privilege of knowing exactly who I am and where I come from." She leaned forward, eyes narrow, her words sharp. "You don't get to tell me how to be American." Patel met her gaze with unflinching intensity. "Is that so? You want to talk about privilege? Because what you're suggesting, what you're implying, is that only people who've been here for generations can truly understand American values." He paused, his voice growing louder, bolder. "But that's bullshit, and you know it. You don't have to be born here to love this country. You just have to be willing to serve it." Crockett's face reddened, but she wasn't going to back down. "You're all about service, huh? How's that working out for you? You spent years working for a man who attacked the press, the very institution that keeps America accountable. That's service to you." Patel's jaw tightened, but his composure didn't waver. "I worked for a president who put America first," he shot back. "What did you do? Attack him every chance you got, then run to a podium and preach about justice. Justice for who exactly? The media. Because we both know that the media has played a key role in dividing this country." The debate was heating up, and Anderson Cooper, trying to regain control, had to take a step back. He knew this was no longer about national security or immigration. This was about something deeper: identity, loyalty, and what it really means to be American. Patel had positioned himself as a patriot, someone who had bled for this country. Crockett, on the other hand, presented herself as the voice of progressive America, advocating for change and accountability. The audience was no longer just watching. They were actively participating. The energy in the room shifted as Patel's calm, collected responses began to win over the crowd. The debate, which had started with a focus on policy, had turned into a battle for the soul of America itself. As the seconds ticked by, it was clear this was no longer a debate. It was a clash of ideals, a battle over what America stood for and who could lay claim to the title of real American. Jasmine Crockett had just launched her attack on Patel, and the debate was no longer about policy, it was now deeply personal. The tension in the room escalated with every passing second. Anderson Cooper, visibly rattled by the intensity of the exchange, adjusted his microphone, trying to get the conversation back on track. But there was no stopping what was happening. What had started as a measured debate had turned into a volatile confrontation, one where the stakes were much higher than mere policy. Mr. Patel Crockett began again, voice dripping with sarcasm. "You've had your say, now it's my turn. You like to talk a lot about loyalty and service, but how much of that is really about your own political agenda? You worked for a man who did everything he could to undermine American institutions, and now you sit here talking about true Americans. What is that supposed to mean?" Patel's face tightened, but he remained calm. "You're right about one thing," he replied, his voice steady. "I did work for a president who fought to put America first. That's not something I apologize for. You're free to attack Trump all you want, but what you can't do is deny that the policies we put in place helped keep this country safer." Crockett's eyes narrowed and she leaned forward, her voice sharper. "Really safer. You want to tell me that putting kids in cages at the border and labeling an entire race of people criminals made us safer? You think calling people who disagree with you enemies of the state is protecting American values?" Patel didn't flinch. "You're twisting the facts. The policies we put in place were about protecting the American people, not about punishing people for their race or nationality. But it's easy to throw around terms like racist and xenophobic when you've never had to make the tough decisions, when you've never been in the trenches." He leaned in slightly, making direct eye contact with Crockett. "But I have. I've been in the field. I've fought terrorists. I've put criminals behind bars. You don't get to lecture me about what's best for America." Crockett sneered, clearly annoyed by Patel's response. "So now you're the hero. The martyr." She scoffed. "I've heard this story before. You're trying to make yourself out to be some sort of American saint. But let me tell you something, Patel, you're just a pawn in a game that's been rigged for people like you to succeed. You don't represent real America. You represent a version of America that's only concerned with power and control." Patel's eyes flickered with intensity, but he maintained his composure. "I'm not here to play games, Jasmine. I'm here because I believe in this country. I believe in the idea that anyone, no matter where they come from, can achieve greatness if they work hard and give everything they have to this nation. And you want to dismiss me as a pawn. I've sacrificed more for this country than you'll ever understand." Crockett scoffed again, but this time there was a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. She hadn't expected Patel to hit back so hard so directly. She had hoped to rattle him, to make him question his loyalty, but he was standing his ground, and the audience was noticing. The crowd in the studio had been murmuring during the exchange, but now as Patel spoke, they grew quieter. Some leaned forward, listening intently as if they too were questioning what it meant to be American. Anderson Cooper, sensing the tension, stepped in again. "Let's bring it back to the issues at hand," he said, trying to steer the debate back to national security and immigration. "We've heard a lot of personal attacks, but let's refocus on the policies. How do we address the growing divide in the country on issues like border security, immigration, and national safety?" Crockett and Patel exchanged a brief tense glance before Patel responded. "The divide is real." Anderson Patel began, his voice calm but firm. "But it's not just about immigration. It's about who gets to define what it means to be an American. What we've seen from politicians like Jasmine is a growing tendency to focus on dividing the country, drawing lines between us and them. But that's not what America is about. We are a country built on diversity, on the idea that we welcome those who want to come here and contribute regardless of where they come from." Crockett rolled her eyes, clearly unimpressed. "Oh, please." "The only thing you're interested in is selling out to the highest bidder," she shot back. "You want to talk about welcoming immigrants. Fine, but let's talk about what happens when immigrants come here illegally. Let's talk about the strain on our system. Let's talk about the real costs of mass immigration." Patel's response was measured. "The real cost is not in welcoming people who want to contribute. The real cost is in a system that doesn't give people a path to citizenship. The real cost is in a government that doesn't do enough to support those who need it. But let me be clear, the American dream is alive and well, and that dream isn't determined by how long your family has been here. It's determined by what you're willing to do for this country. The debate had shifted again. This wasn't just about policies anymore. This was about the vision for America's future. Patel's words hung in the air, and the audience, many of whom had initially sided with Crockett, now seemed to be leaning in his direction. His calm, logical responses were cutting through the noise, and for the first time in the debate, it was clear that Patel was starting to win the crowd. As the debate continued, both candidates dug in their heels. Crockett, her voice rising in frustration, kept coming back to the idea that America was being overrun by immigrants. But Patel, his voice calm and measured, responded with the facts, the truth about the American dream, about hard work, about what it really meant to be loyal to this country. In that moment, it wasn't about policies anymore. It wasn't about party lines. It was about the vision for what America should be and who could claim ownership of its future. And for the first time in the debate, it was clear that the vision Patel was presenting was winning out. His measured approach, his understanding of the nation's complexities, and his refusal to back down were starting to resonate. The tension in the studio was palpable. As the final moments of the debate ticked away, both candidates knew one thing for certain: the conversation they were having wasn't just about national security anymore. It was about defining what it meant to be American in 2025. As the debate pressed on, it became clear that the gloves were off, and both Patel and Crockett were playing for keeps. The studio's energy was a mix of anticipation and tension as the audience waited for the next bombshell to drop. Anderson Cooper, trying to maintain some semblance of order, struggled to rein in the rising intensity. But neither Patel nor Crockett seemed willing to yield ground, and their sharp words were hitting harder with every passing moment. It was Patel's turn again. He leaned forward slightly, looking directly at Crockett, his voice steady but carrying the weight of years spent in high-stakes situations. "You want to talk about loyalty, Jasmine? You want to talk about what it means to be a real American?" he said, his tone challenging. "You've spent the last few minutes accusing me of being a pawn, but let me ask you this. How many times have you put your life on the line for this country? How many times have you faced a real threat and said, 'I'm here to protect America no matter the cost'?" Crockett's jaw clenched. She was prepared for policy debates, for ideas to clash, but Patel was pushing the conversation to a place that made her uncomfortable. Her mind raced, but she maintained her defiant posture. "I don't need to prove my loyalty to anyone," she shot back, her voice tinged with bitterness. "I'm not the one who's been working to tear down our institutions. You're the one who's been standing beside a man who called the press the enemy of the people. You want to lecture me on loyalty, but your idea of loyalty is blind allegiance to a president who didn't care about anyone except himself." Patel's eyes darkened, and his calm demeanor gave way to a brief but intense flash of emotion. "My loyalty is to America," he said, voice low but fierce. "Not to any man, not to any party. If you want to attack me for defending a president who put American interests first, then so be it. But I know one thing: you don't get to question my loyalty to this country. I've given more to this nation than you'll ever understand." The audience had gone silent, hanging on every word. Crockett had hoped to put Patel on the defensive to weaken his position, but now she could feel the tide turning. She had underestimated him, and now it seemed as though she was the one on the back foot. Seeing that the debate was becoming more about identity than policy, Anderson Cooper tried to shift the conversation back to the issue at hand. "Let's focus on the policy, both of you." He interjected, his voice louder now, hoping to regain some control. "Immigration and national security are at the heart of this debate. How do we find common ground and secure the future of this country?" But Crockett wasn't ready to let go of the fight. "The common ground is simple, Anderson," she replied, leaning forward. "America is being overrun. We need strict control, stronger borders, and we need to prioritize the safety of our citizens. The policies that Patel and his team push through aren't about keeping us safe, they're about serving their political interests, nothing more." Patel didn't respond immediately. He looked at Crockett, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, it was deliberate, as though he had weighed every word carefully. "America is a nation of immigrants. I don't need to tell you that, because you know it as well as I do. What I'm saying is that we need a system that works. We need to prioritize those who contribute to our society, not just focus on the ones who break the law. Our laws should be fair, but they should also be about what's best for this country." Crockett shook her head in disbelief. You think the system is fair. You think letting in anyone who wants to come is what's best for this country. Patel's response was sharp, yet measured. No, Jasmine, I think the system needs to be reformed. But your vision, your version of America doesn't include the very people who built this country. The ones who came here with nothing, worked hard, and gave everything for this country. He paused, his gaze unwavering. That's the America I believe in. The room went quiet. The audience, once divided, was now leaning toward Patel's side. His calm, collected demeanor, combined with his unshakable belief in the values that made America great, was winning them over. The debate had shifted once again. It wasn't just about policies anymore, it was about the soul of America. Jasmine Crockett's eyes narrowed. She could feel the ground shifting beneath her feet. She had come into this debate ready to dismantle Patel's arguments, but now she wasn't sure she was winning. She had attacked him personally, and now it seemed like she was losing the ideological battle. Patel, sensing his moment, pushed further. You want to talk about what America stands for, Jasmine? Fine. Let's talk about it. America isn't about race or where you're from. It's about what you're willing to do for this country. Are you willing to serve? Are you willing to make sacrifices? Or are you just here for the applause, the power, the politics? The audience, which had been on edge throughout the debate, suddenly seemed to shift. There was a sense of recognition in the room. Patel had won them over not just with facts, but with his authenticity. This was no longer a debate about policy. This was about what it meant to be truly American. The final moments of the debate were nothing more than a formality. Patel had already won. The crowd was on its feet applauding, and even Anderson Cooper, in his usual professional demeanor, couldn't hide a small smile. He had witnessed a moment of political brilliance. Jasmine Crockett, meanwhile, sat silently, the weight of her words heavy in the air. It was clear she had been outmatched. As the debate concluded, the entire nation knew one thing for sure. Kash Patel hadn't just defended his values, he had shown America what it meant to truly be an American. As the debate entered its final moments, the air in the studio was thick with anticipation. The tone had shifted, and both candidates knew that this wasn't just about winning the argument, it was about defining their political legacies. Kash Patel had done the unthinkable. He had not only defended his position on immigration and national security, but had exposed a truth about American identity that left his opponent reeling. Jasmine Crockett, whose face was now flushed with frustration, had hoped that by targeting Patel's background, she could paint him as an outsider who didn't understand real America. But Patel's steady responses and refusal to be baited into anger had turned the tables. He had countered her attacks with grace, logic, and the weight of his own experiences that Crockett could never match. Anderson Cooper, sensing the debate was approaching its peak, stepped in once more. His voice was firmer now, trying to create a bridge between the two candidates. We're nearing the end of the debate, and I think we can both agree that the issues of immigration and national security are at the forefront of American politics today. But let's finish by discussing what you think the future holds for America. How do we move forward? Patel, without hesitation, responded first. The future of America lies in embracing the ideals that made us great, he said, his voice clear and unwavering. We are a country of immigrants, of hard workers who sacrifice everything to build a better life for themselves and their families, but we need to get back to the basics. We need to stop dividing ourselves along lines of race, religion, and background. America is a place for people who are willing to serve, to work hard, and to contribute to society. That's what makes us great. His words echoed in the studio, and for the first time that evening, the tension seemed to ease. The audience, once divided, now seemed to be listening more closely, some even nodding in agreement. Patel wasn't just talking about policy anymore. He was speaking to the heart of what it meant to be American. Crockett, still reeling from Patel's previous response, tried to recover. You're living in a fantasy, she said, her tone dismissive. You can't just wish away the problems facing this country. Immigration is out of control. We need leaders who are willing to face the facts, who aren't afraid to make the tough choices to protect American citizens. If we don't take action now, we'll lose what makes America great. Patel's response was measured, but it carried a force that couldn't be ignored. I'm not living in a fantasy, Jasmine. I'm living in the reality that America is a land of opportunity for everyone who is willing to put in the work. We don't need to shut our doors to people who want to contribute. What we need is a system that works for everyone. A system that prioritizes the American people, but also doesn't forget that we are a nation that was built by immigrants. It's not about shutting people out, it's about making sure that everyone has a fair chance to succeed. Crockett's expression hardened again, but she wasn't able to deliver the punch she'd hoped for. Patel's words had struck a chord, and the audience could feel it. For all her attacks on his loyalty and his identity, Patel had outmaneuvered her with one simple truth: America's greatness was defined by its ability to welcome those who wanted to contribute. Anderson Cooper, now sensing the end of the debate, looked to both candidates. "It's clear that both of you have strong opinions on this issue," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. "But as we wrap up, I think it's important for the American people to hear what you think is the biggest challenge facing this country today and how you plan to address it." Patel didn't miss a beat. "The biggest challenge facing America is division," he said. "We are so focused on tearing each other down that we've lost sight of what made this country great in the first place. We need to focus on unity, on finding common ground. We need leaders who will put country over party, who will put the American people first, not their own political ambitions." Crockett's voice faltered, but she quickly regained her composure. "The biggest challenge facing this country is ensuring that America stays safe," she said, though her words seemed less confident now. "We need stronger borders, tougher immigration laws, and a government that will protect its citizens from the dangers that lie beyond our borders." The contrast between the two candidates was stark. Patel was calling for unity, for the American people to come together and focus on the values that made America strong. Crockett, on the other hand, was doubling down on the idea that America's future lay in walls and divisions. As the debate wound down, it was clear that Patel had won. The studio erupted in applause, some clapping enthusiastically, others more reserved, but the overwhelming sentiment was clear. Kash Patel had not just held his ground, he had delivered a decisive blow to his opponent. The conversation had shifted, and America had just witnessed a defining moment in the 2025 political landscape. Crockett, her face flushed with frustration, stood silently as Patel nodded to the crowd. He had said what needed to be said. He had defended America's core values and showed the country exactly what it meant to be a true patriot. The lights dimmed, the applause continued, and as Patel left the stage, the message was undeniable. America's strength lay in its people, in their willingness to serve, and in the unity that came from embracing all who sought to contribute to its future. The studio lights dimmed, but the buzz of the debate lingered. As Kash Patel exited the stage, the weight of his words hung in the air like a quiet storm, reverberating long after the final applause. Anderson Cooper wrapped up the debate, but it was clear this wasn't just another talking point in the political sphere. The country had just witnessed something far more consequential. The conversation had shifted, and a new narrative was taking hold. Outside the studio, social media exploded. The hashtag Jachkaro Patel takes on Crockett trended within minutes, with clips of Patel's calm but forceful responses flooding every platform. Conservatives praised him for standing firm, for putting country over party, and for calling out the hypocrisy of his opponent. "That's how you shut down a divisive narrative," one tweet read. Another shared a meme of Patel standing tall with the caption, "The real America Service Sacrifice Unity." The right-wing pundits were quick to celebrate his victory, saying Patel had exposed the cracks in Crockett's argument. But it wasn't just conservatives who took notice. Liberals and independents alike flooded Twitter with comments, many of them praising Patel for one key moment in the debate. When Patel, with calm precision, responded to Crockett's racial insinuation, stating, "My loyalty to this country is not based on where I was born or the color of my skin, it's about what I've done for this country." The audience, both in the studio and online, took notice. Even those who disagreed with him politically had to admit there was something undeniably powerful in his message, a message that transcended partisan lines. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett's social media presence took a hit. Her harsh comments about Patel's background had already sparked a firestorm. The backlash was swift and unforgiving. "Is this what the future of the Democratic Party looks like?" one tweet asked. Others criticized her for trying to divide the country on racial lines, accusing her of playing into the very narrative that Patel had spent the debate dismantling. The optics were damaging. Politically, the fallout for Crockett was immediate. Within hours, major donors who had supported her congressional campaign began to distance themselves, stating that they could not back a candidate who resorted to personal attacks of that nature. Her communications team issued a half-hearted apology, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. She had underestimated Patel and in the process had alienated a large portion of the electorate. For Patel, however, this debate marked a turning point. The national recognition was immediate, but what followed was even more significant. Political figures from both sides of the aisle began reaching out. On the Republican side, some saw Patel as the future of the party, a strong, reasoned voice who could bridge divides without compromising principles. Some even floated his name for higher office. Within a week, Patel's approval ratings within key battleground states surged. But it wasn't just his political career that changed. Patel had managed to do what few politicians could. He had made the American people stop and think. His words, grounded in service and sacrifice, spoke to a deep, resonant truth about the American experience that cut across political ideologies. The narrative had shifted from division to unity, from exclusion to inclusion. It wasn't just about immigration or national security anymore. It was about the soul of America itself. Patel's victory wasn't a victory over Crockett. It was a victory for every American who had ever been told they didn't belong, for every immigrant who had worked tirelessly to make this country their own. And as Patel made his way into the next chapter of his political career, it was clear that his message would continue to resonate. America's strength is found in its people who serve, who sacrifice, and who contribute to the greatness of this nation no matter where they come from. As the weeks passed, the media's focus began to shift away from the individual candidates and onto the larger conversation Patel had sparked. America, it seemed, was ready for a new kind of discourse, a discourse that transcended party lines, that focused on values, and that called on every citizen to examine what it truly meant to be an American. The stage was set for the next battle in the political arena, but for now, Kash Patel had delivered a message that would define the future of American politics for years to come. As the dust settled from the fiery debate, the true impact of the showdown began to take shape. Kash Patel's quiet confidence had sparked a nationwide conversation about identity, values, and the future of America. His words had transcended the boundaries of party lines, inviting both praise and criticism, but more importantly, sparking reflection. The aftermath wasn't just about a win or loss in the political arena. It was about reshaping how Americans viewed loyalty and identity in a rapidly changing nation. Patel's message had reminded the country of what it meant to be truly American, built on service, sacrifice, and inclusivity. Jasmine Crockett, once seen as a rising star, found her political future in jeopardy. Her divisive remarks about Patel's immigrant background and loyalty had backfired, drawing severe backlash. For Patel, however, the door to even greater political influence swung open wide. The debate wasn't just a moment in time, it had become a defining chapter in the story of American politics, one that would echo in the years to come.